What's up, y'all? I hope you got to catch the last video. My father and I got our 2021 Saskatchewan bucks back. They're hung up in my trophy room. Look great. Today I just want to take you through the 2023 hit list. Looks like it could be a pretty promising year, so stay tuned. We'll see what's in store. Bad Company is a deer that I've had years of history with. I've been watching him since the 2020 season when he was a 3.5-year-old by my estimation. As you can see here, he's a 5.5-year-old. I had a crazy encounter with him this year. I climbed down out of the stand and Army crawled over to him about 53 yards, I believe, and ended up missing him below with my Raven crossbow. And turns out I had a string issue, so that was unfortunate. I had an encounter with him this year, 2021 season, one time, about 45 yards. He was back in the brush and never got an opportunity. He was with a doe. It was on November 5th. I believe I included a picture here of him in daylight that day, but I don't know what happened with this deer. He was really spending his falls in this spot for the 2 years, 2020 and 2021, but this past season, I only saw him in the early season in September, so once he shed his velvet, he was gone, but hopefully he'll be back this year and be awesome. I think he's going to be a 6.5-year-old, but as you can see in this year, he really hasn't grown too much, but I had 4 encounters in 2020, so awesome buck. Next we come to Cope. Gave him that name because he's kind of, you can see on his lip right there, it kind of looks like he's got a chaw in his lip and his cheek. So like Copenhagen, I call him Cope now. I think he was a 3.5-year-old this year in 2022, but my dad passed him a few times. As you can see, he's taking some footage of him right here, actually. Good looking buck. He's got some nice brows, pretty short tines, pretty wide, but hopefully he'll put on some size. A lot of times it seems like the bucks tend to put on a decent amount when they turn 4.5. I'm almost 99% sure that this was him in the 21 season. Looked very similar, had some similar markings, so he put on a lot of size there. This is another buck. I think he was a 3.5-year-old this year, and my dad had several encounters with. He spent a little bit more time hunting at this location than I did, but I did not actually see him on the hoof, but he's got some pretty good potential. He's got nice long G2s, as you can see. This is when he's still growing in velvet, but we believe he was a 3.5-year-old, potentially 2.5, but I don't know. I think he was a 3-year-old. So this buck, this buck we've been watching for 2 years now. He has a huge body. He's definitely at least a 4.5-year-old. I'm most certain that he's a 4.5-year-old. So my dad actually had the bow explode when he tried to shoot that deer this year at 7 yards. There's him the season before. Looks like a 3.5-year-old. Didn't change too much, just put on some mass, really. This deer I like to call One Day. So this year he kind of just disappeared. I only got this set of pictures of him and one other day when you could barely tell what he was, but it was definitely the same deer. Been watching him since he was 1.5. He was 3.5 this year. As you'll see as we go back, this is when he was a 2.5-year-old, just a clean 7. This year he threw a split and was a 9-point, but unfortunately he disappeared. I don't know if he died or if Stubbs, that bigger body deer, kicked him out or what. Then we come to the Crab 6. This deer's in the same spot as these last few. Those dates are wrong. Just a pretty standard 6-point. He just doesn't have much rack for his age. This deer, I'm almost 99% sure he was a 3.5-year-old. Call him Longaberger because he's high and tight, kind of like a basket rack. You ever heard of a Longaberger basket? But that's what I used to do with my mom when I was a kid. And here's Pretty Boy. I have extremely high hopes for this deer this year. He is a gorgeous 8-pointer, as you can see. He's about as perfect as they get. 3.5-year-old, 99% sure. He disappears usually after early November. He ruts somewhere else, but I think I do have a pretty good chance of killing that deer. He's been right on the verge of daylight several times in the early season through October. So hopefully I can figure him out and get him on the ground. I think he might make a nice jump this year. You'll see here he is in 2021 as a 2.5-year-old. Real clean 8-point then as well. He just had real short brows, but he's got that one curved out brow. I could recognize him right away. He's there on the right. Beautiful looking deer. Hopefully he comes back and he's looking good. This deer is probably the deer that I have the best chance of killing. He is a very big 6-point, as you can see. Short tines, but he's got a nice frame. I had tons of daylight pictures of this deer in the rut. I included a few of those here. He's just a nice, clean, wide 6-point, but he'll never be anything, too big. So, big bodied deer, be nice to harvest him. This is him when I think he was a 2.5-year-old. There's Bad Company on the left, and there he is in daylight last year, 2 years ago. Junior was a deer this year I had very high hopes for. You can see him there in early July. He had already put on a good amount of inches right there, but he disappeared after that, never saw him again, and I had him on camera more than any deer in 2021 season. He's in the back there in the middle. He was just a pretty standard 8-point, but I call him Junior because he looks exactly like a buck that I have on my wall from this same spot from 2 years prior. So hopefully he comes back this year. It would be nice to see what he's turned into. I would imagine he's very nice. And then this year, this was when he was a 1.5-year-old. I had him right under my stand several times. So hopefully if he can come back as a 4.5-year-old, he should be right on towards the top of the hit list. And this is a buck. I have no idea who he is. He showed up this year as a 3.5-year-old. I'm almost certain he's a 3.5-year-old. And he was, as you can see, he was in daylight pretty often. So I think I'll have a good chance if he made it. This buck, Mac, he rolled with Bad Company. Bad Company is definitely number 1 on the hit list. Bad Company in the front, Mac's in the back there. And I call him Mac because he looks like a Mack truck. He has a huge body. Bad Company was a 5.5-year-old, and he had a bigger body this year at a 3.5. I had pictures of him in the 21 season. Very distinctive rack. You can see his brows like that, his main beams stick way up, and he's got some real long brows. So hopefully if he comes back this year, he'd be a pretty cool deer to harvest. He's right there in the front. Okay, this is a different spot. BC Junior, Bad Company Junior. Kind of looks a little bit like Bad Company, but he's actually, I don't know why I called him Junior, because I think he's actually a bigger deer. But nice split brow, huge long tines. Hopefully he comes back this year. I think he was a 4.5-year-old. This deer, call him Chunk, as you can probably see why. Just kind of looks like a chunky deer. He's probably a 3.5-year-old by my estimation. I have no history at this spot, so these are all guesses just based off of this year. But he's just a clean 8-point. He's real wide in between his brows. Could be interesting to see what he turns into. Roman, I originally thought this deer was extremely old, but I believe after seeing some more pictures, I think he might just have a nose injury. That's how he got his name, Roman. You'll see in this picture here, he's got like a real Roman nose, but I don't think he'll ever be anything too special rack-wise, so we'll see what he turns into. This deer, he was daylight and active in this spot a lot. I think he was a 3.5-year-old this year. So next year he should be a very promising 4.5-year-old. He carries some pretty good mass through his beams. Call him Beamer because they're long and they wrap around, as you can see. NTB. So this deer, this is the only set of pictures I got of him, but I call him NTB for not that big because everybody I sent these pictures to said he was not that big, but I think everybody's wrong. He looks like a huge bodied deer. I think he might be surprising if I ever get him on the ground. And this is NTB Junior. My dad passed this deer at 40 yards this year. And you can see why I called him NTB Junior. He just looks like the same deer, just smaller. I think he was a 3.5-year-old this year. He should be 4.5 next year. But I think there's a pretty good chance of harvesting that deer. He should be very nice next year, hopefully 130 class. Tall boy. We never saw this deer, but I actually never hunted this spot. This is a new spot that we just got. My dad hunted it hard during the rut, and he never saw this deer. We were hoping to see him in person. I think he might be a deer that's just a little bit bigger than he appears in the pictures, but he actually ended up snapping his entire side off. And until I got that picture, I didn't really realize how nice that side was. Right here, you can see the split G2 there. This is Dagger. You'll see why when he turns to the side, he's called Dagger. See that brow tine there? Sticks straight forward like a dagger. But just a good-looking 8-point, 3.5-year-old, I'm almost certain. So he should be nice deer next year. Norm, I saw this deer one time. Chances of getting him are very slim, but we'll call him Norm because he's just a normal 8-point. Looked like a 3.5-year-old. This deer, the blind eye 8, You can see he has a blind eye. He was very active, daylight active as well, a few times in mid to late October in this area. He doesn't have too much of a rack, but he looks like he has pretty nice bases and nice brows. Big body deer, though. I'm most certain he was a 4.5-year-old. So here we come to some honorable mentions. These deer are deer that are just young. I mean, that looks like a 2-year-old right there. Solid 8-point. I saw him from the stand one time this year. He looks pretty nice. He could be nice in 2 years. This deer I have extremely high hopes for. Super wide, at least 19 inches inside, with no brows, but 100% a 2.5-year-old. He looks like he could be something really special in a few years. So, and as you can see, he was daylight active, so definitely a high possibility of getting him on the ground one day. And I know for a fact he made it through the season as well. This is a deer I call Y-beams. I only had a few times he was on camera. You can see why I call him that. It's kind of high, goofy rack buck. Looks like a 2-year-old. This is Lucky Jr., the deer, the 6-point. He looks just like Lucky, just a year younger. I had an encounter with that deer this year. I passed him up. This deer I call Terp because he snapped off all of his tines, and snap made me think of snapping turtle, so I'm calling him Terp. But beautiful young deer. High hopes for him. This is him as a 1.5-year-old. Thank you guys for watching. If you could like and subscribe, that'd be awesome. And follow along and see if we can get a few of these bucks on the ground this year. Thank you.